Have you ever wondered why some people seem to effortlessly build wealth while others struggle their entire lives, even with good intentions and hard work? The answer isn't what most people think. It's not about being smarter, having better opportunities, or even starting with more money. The wealthy follow a set of invisible rules that most people never learn, and today we're going to expose every single one of them. Picture this. While millions of people were losing their life savings during the 2008 financial crisis, one hedge fund manager walked away with over $4 billion in personal profit. His name was John Paulson, and while everyone else was panicking, he was executing a plan he'd been preparing for years. What made him different wasn't luck or insider information. It was his unwavering commitment to a completely different set of principles about money. The truth is, there's a hidden code that separates those who build lasting wealth from those who chase it. These aren't the surface-level tips you hear everywhere, like spend less than you earn or start investing early. Those are kindergarten lessons compared to what we're about to uncover. The wealthy operate by deeper, more sophisticated rules that they rarely discuss openly. If you're ready to completely transform how you think about money and finally understand why your current approach might be sabotaging your financial future, then you need to hear every word of this video. Hit that subscribe button right now because this isn't just another finance video. This is a masterclass in the psychology of wealth that could change your life forever. Let's start with the first rule that separates the wealthy from everyone else. And it might shock you because it goes against everything you've been taught about success. Rule number 1, your behavior matters more than your brilliance. Most people believe that the smartest person in the room wins when it comes to money. They think if they just learn enough, read enough books, or get enough education, wealth will naturally follow. But here's what the rich know that others don't. Intelligence can actually work against you when building wealth. Think about it. How many brilliant people do you know who are terrible with money? Doctors who live paycheck to paycheck despite six-figure incomes. Engineers who can solve complex problems but can't stick to a budget. Lawyers who understand intricate contracts but panic sell their investments at the worst possible times. The wealthy understand something crucial. Knowledge without the right behavior is worthless. In fact, sometimes being too smart becomes a liability because intelligent people often think they can outsmart the market, time their decisions perfectly, or find shortcuts that don't exist. When markets crash, smart people create elaborate theories about why this time is different. They analyze endless data, read expert opinions, and convince themselves they can predict what happens next. Meanwhile, the wealthy simply follow their predetermined rules. They don't try to be clever. They try to be consistent. This is why behavior beats brilliance every single time. The wealthy don't make financial decisions based on how they feel or what seems logical in the moment. They create systems when things are calm, then follow those systems religiously when chaos hits. No second guessing, no emotional detours, just execution. Here's the beautiful part about this rule. Behavior can be trained and improved, but intelligence is largely fixed. You don't need a higher IQ to build wealth. You need better habits, clearer rules, and the discipline to follow them even when every instinct tells you to do something else. Most people break this rule constantly. They read about a great investment strategy, get excited, start implementing it, then abandon it the moment the market dips or they see something shinier. They let their emotions drive their decisions and wonder why their results are so inconsistent. The wealthy treat emotions like noise. They acknowledge them, then set them aside and do what their system tells them to do. This isn't about suppressing feelings or being robotic. It's about recognizing that financial decisions made during emotional highs or lows are almost always wrong. If you're struggling to build wealth despite having good knowledge and intentions, the problem probably isn't your strategy, it's your behavior. Fix your behavior, and suddenly everything else starts working the way it's supposed to. This leads us perfectly into the second rule, which explains why even smart people consistently make poor financial choices. Rule number 2, incentives control everything. Here's a disturbing truth about human nature. Even the most intelligent, well-intentioned people will make terrible decisions if the incentives are structured wrong. And the wealthy understand this better than anyone. Look around at any seemingly irrational behavior in politics, business, or personal finance. And you'll almost always find that the person is simply responding to the incentives in their environment. The behavior isn't crazy when you understand what rewards and punishments are driving it. This is why the wealthy don't rely on willpower alone. They engineer their environments so that doing the right thing becomes the easy thing, and doing the wrong thing becomes painful or impossible. Want to save more money automatically? They set up systems where money gets moved to savings before they even see it. Want to invest consistently? They make it harder to access their investment accounts on a whim. Want to avoid lifestyle inflation? They surround themselves with people who share similar values about money rather than those who compete on status. These aren't life hacks, they're incentive engineering. The wealthy understand that their future selves will face temptations, emotional moments, and social pressures that could derail their plans. So they create guardrails in advance. Most people do the opposite. They rely on discipline and good intentions, then blame themselves when they fail. They keep their emergency fund and checking accounts where it's easy to spend. They follow social media accounts that make them feel inadequate about their lifestyle. They hang around people who pressure them to spend money they don't have. Then they wonder why they keep making the same financial mistakes over and over again. The wealthy know that the game is rigged by default, so they rig it in their favor. They design their financial lives so that the smart choice becomes the obvious choice, and the destructive choice becomes difficult or impossible. This principle extends far beyond personal finance. If your workplace rewards short-term thinking over long-term strategy, guess what kind of decisions you'll make? If your social circle values appearance over substance, guess where your money will go? If your information diet consists of daily market updates and financial news, guess how you'll start to think about investing? The environment you create will shape your behavior more than your intentions ever will. This is why changing your incentives is often more powerful than trying to change your mindset. Rule number 3 reveals something uncomfortable that most people don't want to admit about themselves. Rule number 3, you are not immune to information overwhelm and media manipulation. Every morning you wake up and within minutes, you're hit with headlines about market crashes, economic predictions, cryptocurrency rallies, or political events that could affect your finances. Whether you realize it or not, this constant stream of information is changing how you feel and how you think about money. Your brain releases dopamine when you see exciting financial news. Your anxiety spikes when you read about potential threats to your investments. Even if you think you're too smart to be influenced by media hype, your emotional chemistry is responding to every piece of information you consume. The wealthy recognize that reacting to this daily noise is one of the biggest threats to long-term wealth building. They understand that most financial media exists to capture attention, not to provide useful guidance. Drama sells, so that's what gets produced. Think about it logically. If a news outlet published an article every day that said, continue doing what you were doing yesterday because long-term investing requires patience and consistency, how many people would click on that? Instead, they publish articles about market crashes, hot stock picks, economic disasters, and breakthrough opportunities. Because those headlines trigger emotional responses that generate engagement. The problem is that every time you consume this type of content, it's training your brain to think about money in terms of excitement, fear, and urgency. You start to believe that successful investing requires constant attention and frequent action. You begin to feel like you're missing out if you're not constantly adjusting your strategy. The wealthy take a completely different approach. They limit their information intake deliberately. They choose what enters their minds as carefully as they choose what enters their bodies. They might read 1 or 2 high-quality sources periodically, but they don't consume daily financial news or follow dozens of financial influencers on social media. This isn't about being uninformed. It's about being selective with information that actually matters versus information that just creates noise. They also create buffers between themselves and reactive decision-making. They might review their investment portfolios quarterly or semi-annually rather than daily. They focus on their own financial plans rather than comparing their performance to market indices or other people's results. Most people think they can handle the constant stream of financial information without being affected by it, but that's exactly when it has the most power over them. The moment you believe you're immune to influence is the moment you become most vulnerable to it. Building wealth requires clarity of thought, and clarity becomes impossible when your mind is constantly processing conflicting information, dramatic headlines, and emotional triggers. If checking financial news or investment apps can change your mood or trigger you to make financial decisions, that's a clear sign that the noise has too much influence over you. The solution isn't to try harder to resist the influence. The solution is to remove the source of influence from your environment. This connects directly to our fourth rule, which might be the most important psychological edge the wealthy possess. Rule number 4, time perspective is a superpower. Most people live in a constant state of financial urgency. They worry about what will happen next month, next quarter, or next year. They make decisions based on short-term outcomes and wonder why their long-term results are disappointing. The wealthy operate on a completely different timeline. They think in decades, not months. They make decisions today based on where they want to be 10 or 20 years from now, not based on immediate gratification or short-term comfort. This shift in time perspective changes everything about how you approach money. When you're thinking long-term, temporary market volatility becomes irrelevant background noise. When you're thinking short-term, every fluctuation feels like a crisis that demands immediate action. Long-term thinking makes boring decisions feel strategic. Short-term thinking makes boring decisions feel like missed opportunities. Long-term thinking transforms uncertainty from a threat into an advantage, because you have time for things to work out. Short-term thinking transforms uncertainty into anxiety, because everything feels urgent and risky. Most people destroy their wealth by switching strategies every time something stops working for a few months. They buy investments when prices are high because momentum feels good, then sell when prices are low because fear takes over. They abandon proven systems because results aren't happening fast enough. The wealthy understand that wealth building is not a sprint where the fastest person wins. It's more like planting trees. You do the work up front, then you wait patiently while compound growth does most of the heavy lifting. The longer you wait, the more dramatic the results become. But here's where it gets psychologically challenging. The early years of wealth building often feel slow and unrewarding. You save money and it seems like nothing is happening. You invest consistently and your account balance barely moves. You follow all the right principles, but you don't feel wealthy yet. This is where most people give up. They conclude that their approach isn't working because they're measuring progress on the wrong timescale. They're looking for immediate feedback from a process that produces its best results over long periods. The wealthy have trained themselves to find satisfaction in the process rather than just the outcomes. They celebrate consistency rather than just performance. They measure their success by whether they're following their plan, not by whether their net worth increased this month. When you extend your time horizon, you also gain access to investment opportunities and strategies that aren't available to short-term thinkers. You can invest in assets that might be volatile in the short run, but powerful in the long run. You can take calculated risks because you have time to recover from mistakes. Perhaps most importantly, long-term thinking protects you from the biggest wealth-destroying mistakes that plague short-term thinkers. Panic selling during market downturns, chasing performance, and constantly changing strategies. The question you need to ask yourself is this: are you playing a 10-year game or a 10-month game? One builds lasting wealth, the other builds lasting anxiety. Rule number 5 addresses something that makes most people incredibly uncomfortable, but that the wealthy have learned to navigate skillfully. Rule number 5, embrace uncertainty and trust your systems. Most people hate uncertainty. It makes them anxious, paralyzed, and reactive. They want to know exactly what's going to happen before they make financial decisions, which means they end up making very few financial decisions at all. The wealthy have a completely different relationship with uncertainty. They don't just tolerate it, they prepare for it. They understand that uncertainty is not a bug in the financial system, it's a feature. It's what creates opportunities for people who are prepared to act when others are paralyzed. Here's the key insight. The future will always be uncertain, but your response to uncertainty can be predictable. The wealthy build systems that work regardless of what specific events occur. They focus on principles that remain valid across different scenarios, rather than trying to predict exactly what will happen next. When markets become volatile, when economic conditions change, when unexpected events occur, The wealthy don't ask, "What's the perfect move right now?" They ask, "What does my predetermined system tell me to do in this situation?" This is a fundamental difference in how they approach decision-making. Most people try to optimize each individual decision based on current circumstances. The wealthy optimize their decision-making process and then trust that process regardless of circumstances. Think about it this way. You can't control what happens in the stock market, but you can control how much you invest each month. You can't control whether real estate prices go up or down, but you can control your criteria for making real estate investments. You can't control economic cycles, but you can control how much debt you carry and how much emergency savings you maintain. The wealthy focus their energy on what they can control and build systems around those controllable factors. Then when uncertainty hits, they don't freeze up trying to figure out the optimal response. They simply execute their predetermined plan. Most people do the opposite. When uncertainty increases, they abandon their plans and try to navigate based on their feelings or their interpretation of current events. This almost always leads to poor decisions because uncertainty makes people emotional, and emotional decisions are usually wrong. The wealthy understand that trying to achieve certainty is often just procrastination in disguise. How many people say they'll start investing when the market stabilizes, or they'll start a business when they feel more confident, or they'll make a career change when the timing is perfect? That day rarely comes because certainty is rare. Instead of waiting for uncertainty to disappear, the wealthy build their plans to function effectively even when they can't see clearly. They use principles and systems that work in the fog because most of life happens in the fog. Your job is not to eliminate uncertainty from your financial life. Your job is to make good decisions despite uncertainty. And the way you do that is by following rules and systems that have been tested across many different scenarios. Rule number 6 is about something that trips up even people who understand all the previous rules. Rule number 6, track everything that matters, ignore everything that doesn't. One of the biggest reasons people struggle with money isn't lack of income or even lack of knowledge. It's lack of visibility into their own financial situation. They're making financial decisions based on feelings, estimates, and vague impressions rather than clear data. The wealthy treat their personal finances like a business, which means they track key metrics consistently and review their performance regularly. They know exactly how much money's coming in, where it's going out, how their investments are performing, and whether they're making progress toward their goals. Most people operate in financial fog. They have a rough idea of their income, a vague sense of their expenses, and they hope everything works out okay. They check their bank account occasionally and feel either good or bad based on the number they see, but they don't have systems to understand why that number is what it is or how to improve it systematically. This lack of visibility makes it impossible to make good financial decisions because you're always operating with incomplete information. You might think you're saving money when you're actually spending more than you realize. You might think your investments are performing well when they're actually underperforming your goals. The wealthy create dashboards and tracking systems that give them clear, regular feedback about their financial progress. They don't just track their net worth. They track their savings rate, their investment returns, their spending by category, their progress toward specific goals, and other metrics that help them understand whether their financial plan is working. This isn't about obsessing over every dollar or checking your accounts constantly. It's about creating systems that provide the information you need to make informed decisions without overwhelming you with unnecessary details. When you have clear visibility into your finances, several important things happen. First, you can identify problems early before they become serious. Second, you can see which strategies are actually working versus which ones just feel good. Third, you can make adjustments based on data rather than emotions. Most importantly, tracking creates accountability. When you measure something consistently, you naturally improve it because you become more conscious of the behaviors that drive those results. The challenge is that most people either track nothing or they try to track everything and get overwhelmed. The wealthy focus on a small number of key metrics that actually influence their decisions, and they ignore metrics that are just interesting but not actionable. They also create simple systems that don't require significant time or effort to maintain. The goal is insight, not complexity. If you can't quickly tell me your current savings rate, your investment returns over the past year, and your progress toward your major financial goals, then you probably don't have sufficient visibility into your own financial situation. And without that visibility, you're essentially flying blind financially. Rule number 7 addresses a trap that destroys more wealth than people realize, often without them even noticing it's happening. Rule number 7, detach from external validation, attach to internal progress. In our social media-driven world, it's easy to confuse looking successful with being financially successful. The wealthy understand this distinction clearly, but most people collapse the two concepts into one, and it destroys their financial progress. The pressure to appear successful leads people to make terrible financial decisions. They buy cars they can't afford, live in houses that stretch their budgets, take vacations on credit cards, and wear clothes that cost more than they should, all in service of maintaining an image that actually moves them further from real financial security. Here's the psychological trap. External validation feels good immediately, but it often comes at the expense of long-term financial progress. Real wealth building requires making many decisions that nobody will notice or applaud. Saving money instead of spending it. Investing in boring index funds instead of exciting individual stocks. Living below your means instead of at your means. The wealthy have learned to find satisfaction in private metrics rather than public displays. They measure their success by their savings rate, their investment returns, their debt reduction, and their progress toward financial independence. These accomplishments are largely invisible to others, but they're what actually matter for building wealth. Most people do the opposite. They optimize for things that others can see and admire, even when those things actively harm their financial future. They care more about appearing wealthy than becoming wealthy, which guarantees they'll never actually achieve the financial security they're pretending to have. The wealthy also understand that financial success is not aesthetic. It doesn't look like anything in particular. Some of the wealthiest people you know probably drive ordinary cars, live in modest homes, and wear unremarkable clothes. Their wealth is in their investment accounts, not in their lifestyle displays. This creates an important psychological shift. When you stop trying to prove your financial success to others, you can focus all your energy on actually building financial success for yourself and your family. The people whose opinions you're worried about probably don't know much about building wealth anyway. They're often in the same situation you are, trying to appear successful rather than become successful. Taking financial advice from people who haven't achieved financial success is like taking fitness advice from people who are out of shape. The wealthy tend to be very private about their financial situation because they understand that discussing money often creates more problems than it solves. They don't need external validation because they have internal scorecards that tell them whether they're winning or losing. Here's your challenge. Can you build wealth quietly without anyone noticing or congratulating you? Can you find satisfaction in progress that doesn't generate likes, comments, or social recognition? Can you make financial decisions based on what's best for your future rather than what looks impressive today? If you can master this psychological shift, you'll have access to strategies and opportunities that people focused on external validation will never pursue because they're too busy managing their image. Our final rule might be the most important of all because it determines whether you'll have the patience necessary to let the previous rules actually work. Rule number 8. Wealth building feels slow until it suddenly doesn't. This rule messes with most people's expectations because we live in a world of instant feedback and immediate gratification. The idea that real wealth builds slowly over many years feels almost offensive to people who are accustomed to seeing results quickly. But here's the paradox that the wealthy understand. While most people chase speed, the rich pursue control and consistency. They know that wealth built quickly is often fragile and can disappear just as fast. Wealth built with patience becomes permanent and self-sustaining. This is where the psychology of compounding becomes critical. For the first several years of wealth building, progress feels frustratingly slow. You save money diligently and your account balance barely seems to move. You invest consistently and the returns feel modest compared to the effort you're putting in. During this phase, most people start to question whether their approach is working. They wonder if they should be doing something different, something more aggressive, something that produces faster results. They look at other people who seem to be getting rich quickly, and they feel like they're missing out. This is exactly when most people abandon their long-term strategy and start chasing get-rich-quick schemes, hot investment trends, or risky speculation. They give up just before compounding would have started to accelerate their results dramatically. The wealthy understand that this slow phase is not a sign that something is wrong. It's a sign that something is working exactly as it should. Compounding growth starts slowly by design because it's building a foundation that can support exponential growth later. Think of it like fitness training. For the first several weeks of a workout program, you might not see any visible changes in your body. You're still putting in the work, following the plan, but the results aren't obvious yet. Most people give up during this phase because they don't see immediate progress. But people who stick with the program know that the changes are happening internally, even when they're not visible externally. Muscle fibers are developing, cardiovascular capacity is improving, metabolic efficiency is increasing. All of this foundational work eventually produces dramatic visible results, but only for people who persist through the slow beginning phase. Wealth building works the same way. The first few years are about building habits, establishing systems, and accumulating the base amount of capital that compounding needs to work its magic. The results during this phase feel slow because they are slow, but they're creating the foundation for results that will eventually feel very fast. The wealthy train themselves to find satisfaction in the process during the slow phase because they understand that the process is working even when the results aren't dramatic yet. They celebrate consistency rather than just performance. They measure their success by their adherence to their plan rather than just their account balance. Most importantly, they resist the temptation to abandon proven strategies in favor of approaches that promise faster results. They understand that get rich quick and get rich permanently are usually mutually exclusive goals. Here's what separates people who build lasting wealth from people who struggle financially their entire lives: persistence through the slow phase. The people who give up during the first few years never experience what compound growth feels like when it finally reaches critical mass. If you're currently in the slow phase of wealth building, where you're doing everything right but the results don't feel impressive yet, don't interpret that as failure. That's exactly what success looks like in the beginning. Your job is not to see immediate dramatic results. Your job is to stay consistent long enough for compounding to take over. The wealthy understand that speed is not the goal, control is the goal, sustainability is the goal. Building something that gets stronger over time rather than something that burns bright and then burns out. Now let's bring this all together. You've seen how the wealthy operate by a completely different set of rules than most people follow. These aren't just interesting concepts to think about. They're practical frameworks that you can start implementing in your own financial life immediately. The first rule taught us that behavior beats brilliance, which means your success depends more on developing the right habits than on becoming smarter about money. The second rule showed us that incentives control everything, which means engineering your environment is more powerful than relying on willpower. The third rule revealed that no one is immune to information overwhelm, which means protecting your attention is crucial for maintaining clear thinking about money. The fourth rule demonstrated that time perspective is a superpower, which means learning to think in decades rather than months will transform your decision-making. The fifth rule explained how to embrace uncertainty, which means building systems that work even when you can't predict what will happen next. The sixth rule emphasized the importance of tracking what matters, which means creating visibility into your financial situation so you can make informed decisions. The seventh rule warned about the trap of external validation, which means focusing on internal progress rather than external appearances. And the final rule prepared you for the psychological challenge of compounding, which means persisting through the slow phase until exponential growth takes over. These rules work together as a complete system. You can't just pick one or two and expect dramatic results. The wealthy follow all of these principles consistently because they understand that wealth building is a holistic process that requires psychological discipline, environmental design, and systematic execution. The beautiful thing about these rules is that they're not dependent on your current financial situation, your income level, or your educational background. They're behavioral and psychological principles that work regardless of where you're starting from. But they do require something that many people struggle to provide: consistency over long periods of time. These rules don't work if you follow them for a few months, then abandon them. They work when you integrate them into your identity and follow them for years or decades. The wealthy don't treat these as temporary strategies or short-term tactics. They treat them as permanent operating principles that guide every financial decision they make throughout their entire lives. So here's the question you need to answer honestly. Are you ready to commit to a different way of thinking about money? Are you willing to prioritize long-term wealth building over short-term gratification? Are you prepared to make decisions that might not be popular or impressive, but that compound into financial freedom over time? Most people will watch this video, find the information interesting, but ultimately continue following the same patterns that have kept them financially frustrated. They'll go back to checking their investment accounts daily, making emotional decisions based on market news, chasing performance, and optimizing for external validation. But some people will recognize that these rules represent a fundamentally different approach to building wealth, and they'll commit to implementing them systematically in their own lives. Those people will join the small percentage of individuals who achieve real financial security and independence. The choice is yours, but remember this: the wealthy aren't wealthy because they got lucky or because they're fundamentally different from you. They're wealthy because they follow better rules consistently over long periods of time. Now you know what those rules are. The question isn't whether these rules work. The question is whether you'll work them. Your financial future depends on how you answer that question, and the time to answer it is right now.